Hey, it's Frank here, and today we are going to frame in a door. So as you can see here, I've got my rough-in opening for a door, which is going to be a bedroom door in a basement. Really, the same applies to any door. And I've got the pre-hung door here. This is actually my first time doing a pre-hung door. Normally, I do it piece by piece, but hopefully this will make the job easier. I recommend using a pre-hung door if you haven't done much door hanging. The absolute most important thing to do when you're hanging a door is getting it all square and level. You make the openings so that they're anywhere between 1 1/4 to 2 inches wider than your door, and then you shim it in place, get it all square and leveled up, make sure everything's opening and closing well, secure it, and that's it. So hopefully I can teach you something here, and hopefully I'll learn something myself. Now the first thing I'm going to do is just put a piece of 2x4 across the top of the door opening, just so that it can hold the door frame in place. This door is a 2x4 wall frame. So a 2x4 wall is 3.5 inches wide, and then it's going to have drywall, which is a 1/2 inch on either side. So the casing of the door, I don't know if this is called the casing, this is called the door jamb. I think the door jamb is 4.5 inches wide, so that facilitates 3.5 inches of stud 2x4, and then 2 times 1/2 inch, so 1 inch of drywall on each side. So to make sure it's ending up flush with the drywall, I'm just going to screw a couple of pieces of drywall onto the back of a 2x4 like this, one piece on either side, and screw it up to the top of the frame just so that I can push that push the wall jamb, the door jamb, right into the back of that, so that I know it's approximately in the right place. I start off with the top, pretty close to square, and then we can work on the rest and get it all square. And this is just a little something you've got to do when you're working by yourself, because there's no one to hold the door for you, and there's no place to hold the door in place. At least we start with one known reference point by doing this. Okay, so there you go. So I'm going to show you what I did here, just in case my explanation was pretty crappy, which I think it was. So I just screwed in a 2x4 with a couple of 1/2 inch pieces of drywall. So now, if I bring the door right back to here, the door jamb that is, right back to there, you see? Then it'll be flush with where it needs to finish up. It needs to finish up flush with the 1/2 inch drywall. It's going to end up on this side, see? So hopefully it's out of the way. It's beyond the door frame, so it's not in our way. It's high, so we're not going to be shimming up there, or we can shim from this side, and let's see how that works out. Okay, so what I'm going to try and do is present the door here, and starting from the top, I'm relatively confident the top will be square, because the door, the rough opening is square. So we'll put it in there and just start to try to level it off and square it off, and then shim it. Let's see how it goes. Alright, so there it is. Now I can see that it's against that piece that I set up there. So this side is overlapping 1/2 inch, which is what we want. So now it's a question of making sure we square it. Here's where your carpenter square and your level become really important tools. So what I've done now is I've put the door in place so that there's approximately the same distance between the rough-in frame and the casing at the bottom. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to work on this side here to make this side nice and level, because this is the hinge side. So I want to make sure, first off, that this side is level, and then we'll go up and square the top, and then level and square off the other side, and that should give us a nice square door. Okay, so a little secret which might be considered common sense, but when you shim, make sure you shim from both sides equally. You see how the shims are thick at one end? and thin at the other end, right? So you want to make sure you don't just shim from one side. You just don't want to jam both of the thick ends on one side. What you do is you do one thick end with one thin end. That's how you shim it, so that it remains nice and square. Last thing you want is to actually end up twisting this door, right? So you put in shims from both ends. Try and make sure you put an equal amount, distance of shim from both ends. And these are just cedar shims that you can buy at the hardware store, and they work really great. Once you get used to using them, you really can't do it without it. So that's it. That's one shimmed piece first. I'll screw this in. Make sure this side, the hinge side, maintains nice and level, and then square the top and move over to the other side. Okay, so I'm ready to screw in the second shim, and I'm doing the shims on below the top hinge and above the bottom hinge. Closest possible to the hinges, I think, is probably good for strengthening. Using 3-inch wood screws that are going comfortably well into the frame. And again, I just put that shim in place and just check that the door was still closing nicely and not binding anywhere. The only thing I'm not crazy about right now is that the door does have a tendency to close on its own. You see that? Which is funny because my daughter said that's what she wanted, so I was considering putting some spring hinges on it, but maybe I won't have to. We'll see how that ends up working out when I square the rest of it up. So let's see, let's make sure these shims don't go anywhere. So as you can see, just opening the door moved the shims, so I'm going to have to reinstall them and check everything again. Because if they move that much, the one thing is they can just, move, kind of slide up or down a little bit. They twist when you put the screw in because it's a single screw, right? And the screw rotates them around. But if they fall like they just did, got to redo it. So let's do it. Okay, that's about where it was last time. Door is still closing nicely. I lost the light. There you go. Too many kids walking around the house. And we'll just check for level. And it's still in really good shape. If anything, it just wants to go in a little bit at the bottom. So I'm just going to make one final adjustment and then apply a force so that the shims don't fall off and screw it in. So I'm just moving one shim ever so slightly out so that it just brings the door in just a fraction when I bring the screw on, when I put the screw in. Okay, that's one right there. Let's see what happens. Yeah, definitely went in. Screw countersunk nicely. And the shims are solid. So let's see what the result is as far as the door. Yeah, still closing really nicely. So now we'll do another shim here. And this shim, because it's already level and we haven't already plumb, I guess, we're just going to make it so that the shim just touches the jamb. We're going to make it so that it doesn't really push or pinch anything at all. Put it right above the hinge. Yeah, that looks like it's pretty good. It's not really applying, it's just barely got enough of a force to let it stick there, which is great. Finish it off here. Whoa, easy now, fella. Just hit against the door just as I was finishing there. So you see how shims kind of move down, but that's okay because the screw is in them, so they're not going to go anywhere. So you can just lift them. See how well they're in place here. You can just lift them back up vertically. We'll end up cutting these ends off, and it'll be just fine. A couple of people have asked me how to remove the shims once you've got them in there. All you got to do is score them lightly and then bend them and crack them. Just make sure you score them inside of your finished edge. So this is the finished edge here, so I want to make sure I'm flush with or inside of that edge, because if not, your drywall guy has to deal with them. And you don't want to upset your drywall guy, especially when you're the drywall guy. So you just give them a crack, and they go like so. Alright, you can use these to shim other areas as well.